is known as the Servant Girl Annihilator. In Austin, Texas, between 1884 and 1885, there was an increasing number of people who had been killed in their sleep. After 8 victims, he was officially deemed a serial killer and was given the name Servant Girl Annihilator. And although we have a general understanding of the actual crimes themselves, the Servant Girl Annihilator was never found. Who did it? Was it one person? Or was it a group of killers working together? These are just some of the questions that we'll cover in this video, so stay tuned until the end to see who they think it might be. And if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. But before we dive into any specifics of the case, you're probably wondering where the name came from. Although the servant girl portion of the name is easy to explain as servant girls were his main victims, the second part of the name, Annihilator, is where things get a bit more gruesome. He would find his victims asleep in their beds in the middle of the night and he would repeatedly beat them with an axe until they were essentially unidentifiable. When he was finished, the only way they were able to identify the victims was by their house. If he didn't kill them in their own house, they would have likely never known who they were, especially considering the fact that DNA evidence wasn't even a thing at the time. 3 years before Jack the Ripper started his killings in London, the first victim of the Servant Girl Annihilator was found in Austin. Molly Smith, a 25-year-old African American, was asleep with her husband, Walter Spencer. They both cooked and cleaned for a local wealthy family, and that's what they did for a living. But in the middle of the night, Walter woke up and realized that he had an extremely deep gash on his face that was quite fresh. He also realized that someone had turned the entire place upside down and trashed their dormitory. But after he saw that, he noticed the most important thing: Molly was missing. After following the trail of blood out to the backyard, Walter found Molly's dead body with multiple axe wounds on her face, chest, arms, and legs. And with a little bit of help from the police, they actually managed to locate the murder weapon in Walter and Molly's bedroom, which means she was killed inside before being dragged out to the backyard. After the Servant Girl Annihilator's first victim, he had a cooling down period. But about 6 months after the first, the second victim was found. Eliza Shelley was an African American cook who worked for a wealthy family. She was also given a cabin to live in for free behind the family's house just to make the day-to-day easier. But on May 6, 1884, Eliza's employer discovered her dead body behind the cabin despite the fact that her 3 kids were untouched and completely fine. In actual fact, 2 of them didn't even know anything had happened. This second murder was essentially the exact same as the first. Except this time, the violence had definitely escalated as Eliza's head had been completely split in 2 with an axe. And again, just like the first attack, Eliza was also killed in bed and dragged out to the backyard. This time though, the victim was wrapped in bedsheets which were assumed to have been used to minimize the blood inside and prevent the kids from being traumatized. So despite the brutality, it seemed that the killer still had a certain level of respect for children at least. But despite that, one of Eliza's children did say that they thought they saw something in the middle of the night, but he wasn't 100% sure, so nothing ever came of it. Only about 2 weeks after the second victim, the third was found, Irene Cross. But this one was quite different. The only 2 things that were similar was the fact that the victim was an African American lady and that she was sleeping at the time of the attack. But it wasn't an axe this time. For the third victim, the Servant Girl Annihilator used a knife and cut Irene's arm so badly that it nearly came off. She had also been partially scalped, which left her with a serious head injury as well. And with this victim, the police actually managed to arrive at the scene before Irene passed away from her injuries, but unfortunately, there was nothing that they could do. The Servant Girl Annihilator had killed his third victim. And not long after that, the killer returned in August when he killed the fourth victim, Mary Ramey. In this instance, the victim was only 11 years old and her mother, Rebecca Ramey, was actually the one who was the servant. Mary was dragged from her bed out to the backyard where she was raped and stabbed through her ears with an iron rod. Miraculously, Mary actually survived the attack initially but succumbed to her injuries just hours later at the local hospital. After Mary, the fifth and sixth victims were killed together, Gracie Vance and Orange Washington. They were husband and wife. They lived and worked in the home of a local attorney, keeping the house tidy and cooking their meals. During the early morning hours of September 26, Gracie woke up to the terrifying sight of someone standing over her. She instantly let out an ear-piercing scream, and her husband jumped up to her defense. However, the killer stopped Orange in his tracks with one single blow from an axe that essentially split his skull in half. But he then left Gracie and pivoted his attention to two other servants working in the house at the time before coming back. And once he did, he dragged Gracie outside before beating her to death with a large brick. Similar to the other victims, he also left his axe inside their cabin so that the police would find it as soon as they showed up. This was essentially how he claimed responsibility for the killings. And not long after Mary was found, the Servant Girl Annihilator claimed the life of his last two victims on the same night. These two murders were the two that would later lead police to believe that the Servant Girl Annihilator might actually be linked to Jack the Ripper. However, on December 24, 1885, the night before Christmas, the first white victim was killed, Susan Hancock. Her husband was fast asleep in a completely separate room when the killer entered through the window and dragged Susan to the backyard garden. When police found her dead body, they also found a sharp metallic object stuck in the side of her skull. Her entire head was also split in half. And less than an hour after the death of Susan Hancock came the Servant Girl Annihilator's final victim, Eula Phillips, the second white victim. She was found lying face down in an alleyway of one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Austin, and again, much like the other victims, she was also found with her head split in half. This victim was restrained while being axed, though she was held down with heavy pieces of timber. But just as quickly as the Servant Girl Annihilator popped up, he disappeared the same way. All of a sudden, the killings miraculously stopped. And although there were nearly 400 different suspects interviewed for the murders, after more than 135 years later, the killer remains unknown. He was never found. No one truly knows what happened in this true crime mystery. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, let us know what you think about the Servant Girl Annihilator down in the comments below. And if you like this video, here's another one of our videos that's similar. You might like this one as well.